Well, I hate the word retirement.
Retirement, I find, is a loaded word.
This is not the end of the road. Today, I would much rather call retirement something like next chapter, rewirement, third stage of life, one that can actually be the best, the most fun, the most fulfilling if it's done properly.
Susan, after 4 decades in the financial services industry, what does retirement mean to you? Welcome back to the YouPotential podcast. Today, we're talking about all things retirement, but not in the traditional sense, as a finish line, as the end of our lives, more as the next chapter, the next exciting chapter. My guest is Susan Latremoille. After more than 4 decades working with people around retirement, she realized something important. Money matters, but it's not the only thing that makes retirement or the next chapter great. The non-financial side is where everything really lives. Susan's work is all about helping people redesign the next chapter, known as retirement, as one of the most meaningful stages in their lives. Not the end of the story, but a powerful third act. If you've been enjoying these conversations, please head over to YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Susan, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Sean. Thanks for inviting me to be your guest today.
I'm looking forward to talking about all things retirement. Retirement, I find, is a loaded word. We talk about it all the time. We talk about it in ways that seems to be a finish line, that once you cross this glorious finish line, life finally will unfold and make sense. Susan, after 4 decades in the financial services industry, what does retirement mean to you?
Well, I hate the word retirement. I think it's a word that should have gone obsolete many, many years ago, because retirement today, that we call retirement today, is vastly different than the retirement of previous generations. So today, I would much rather call retirement something like next chapter, rewirement, third stage of life, something that defines the fact that this is not the end of the road, that this is not the time that people are put out of use, that they're retired to their armchair waiting to be put in their grave. No, 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 no. So we really like that's why we call our company Next Chapter, because it really is about a new chapter in life, and one that can actually be the best, the most fun, the most fulfilling if it's done properly. So retire, the word retirement.
I like how you do not like the word retirement. It's so interesting that, like, most of human existence, retirement wasn't even a thing. It was an invention. I believe, like, in the 1800s, the chancellor in Germany brought
That's
it up,
right.
and it was
Yeah.
to help
Yeah.
people transition to death. So the word in itself isn't so glorious. I like these other words of next chapter and third stage, specifically third stage. Why third stage? What's the first and second stage?
So if you divide, let's say, the average life expectancy to 90 years, and we divide it then into thirds. So the first 30 years of life is usually about childhood, growing up, getting an education, maybe starting a career, starting a family. And then there's that age 30 to 60, which would be second chapter or second stage, which would be advancement in career, children growing up, reaching the top of your profession or your industry. And then if we say 60 to 90, or it could be 65 to 98, that's what the third stage is. And this is a time to really go back to the essence of who you are, rediscover yourself, and rediscover so many aspects of life that your childhood and your adolescent, your teen years, your working career life just didn't afford you those opportunities. That's why we call it third stage. 30
I like this.
to,
Sorry.
0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or 65 to 95, or 70 to 100, whatever. stage you decide to take on this next phase of life?
What stage are you in?
I'm in my next chapter. I'm in third stage, most definitely. But for me, this next stage is a reinvention of myself as someone who not only it was a financial advisor, but sees the opportunity for both clients and advisors to redefine this stage of life. So hopefully I'm a living example of this redefinition or rewirement from being a financial advisor, someone like you, to now shedding light on this important subject and helping advisors with their clients in talking about these issues, as well as working with individuals and couples as they define their next chapter.
Susan, I'm always interested in these reinventions or redefining. And I like your word choice of next chapter in our lives. As you sit, as you mentioned, the third chapter or third stage of your life, when you look at specifically that redefining of Susan or that transition from, I believe I read 38 years in the traditional financial planning industry to now the human centric focused side of non-financial planning, as you call it. Can you speak to if there was tension in tension that you felt before that change? And I ask this because I think many of us experience like the way life is. Perhaps we're in the previous stage and we're moving to the next one, but we can't really admit it yet. And there's this tension of two different dualities of our identity. Can you just speak to this if you had this tension as you were transitioning from the traditional financial planning to this more human focused one? Just speak to
Mhm.
how you dealt with that tension.
Sure. Really, I'll talk about the catalyst first,
Yeah.
because that explains that's kind of the backdrop to why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, as you mentioned, Sean, I was a wealth advisor or financial advisor. I don't necessarily use those terms interchangeably, but wealth to me implies a broader scope of looking at a client's life than just simply financial. Anyway, as a wealth advisor for 38 years, I worked with some of my clients over several decades or more. And they were all either high net worth or ultra high net worth people. So having enough money for retirement wasn't their primary focus. But what I noticed was that many of them weren't as happy as they thought they would be in this next stage, in this third stage, in their next chapter. Many of them had bought into that sort of what I call a Hollywood version of retirement, which was, simply play lots of golf, travel, be free, no alarm clock, no bus. Nothing to wake up to in the morning that you didn't want to do or didn't think you had to do. And so what I started was that many of them were not as happy. Why? Because they had been stripped of their identity. They were no longer the important person that they were when they had their career or business. They felt that many of them felt that they didn't really have a purpose in life anymore. That the purpose was totally associated with their job, their role, and so on. So they were drifting a little bit. Many of them felt that they had lost the connections that they had maybe with their clients, their suppliers, their teams at the office where they worked. And many of them felt rudderless, that every day felt like the same as the previous day. There was no distinction between weekdays, weekends, things to look forward to. So I always thought that I was taking a holistic approach in my practice, but I thought, how can we ignore this human side and just focus on the money, just focus on the dollars? And so I really felt that I had to do something about this. And that was the catalyst for me, really, to decide, which I did at the end of 2019, to sell my wealth practice and focus full time on the non financial side. And that's how I got here. So the
Mm.
tension that you refer to was really the pull to the push away from just talking about money and the pull to realizing that there was a broader scope for people in their lives and a broader scope for me than simply a narrower focus on money.
Mm. I mean, as you talk about this, 38 years, I feel like you'd almost feel like a child that you were selling and letting go when you sold that practice. Was it
Yes.
hard for you speak about identity change, was it hard for you to let go of that chapter of Susan's life and step into this new one?
I wouldn't say that identity was my main challenge. I would say that when I talk about social connections, I think that was a major challenge because I really missed, and still do to this day, many of the clients that I'd worked with for years and years. The reason for us to be together had been the financial focus, the financial practice. And so the connections that I had with the team members, people in the organization I worked with clients, with suppliers, I think for me, that's been the hardest part, but it's
Mhm.
also led to opening up the possibility of working with a whole lot of new people that I never would have met or had the opportunity to interact with before. So I think
Mhm.
that was, for me, the hardest part. Identity, not so much, because, I've always been someone that has an identity beyond just my role, just my job. And this role that I have now, this mission that I'm on, is extremely purposeful because I feel we need to change the dialogue, change what this next chapter is all about, from retirement, which has all sorts of negative implications really, to
Mhm.
something much more positive, much more exciting. So that my work now is not that my financial work wasn't filled with purpose, but this is exceedingly purposeful to me at this stage of life.
You mentioned making this next stage of the third stage, classic known as retirement. How do we make it, as you say, more exciting?
How do we make it more exciting in this third stage? Well, it really starts with understanding yourself as a person, because without that self understanding, you really don't know what you're cut out to do. And so when we do work with people, we start with an assessment that looks at truly what their lifestyle priorities are, what motivates them, a lot of who they are. And it's only from this self understanding and awareness can people design their next chapter, their third stage, the way they want to. So it all starts with self understanding. I think it starts with being educated about what the possibilities are, and we've developed a model that we use to really help people do this, a framework, let's say, to be able to think about this next chapter beyond what most people perceive as leisure. Often
Mm.
people think retirement equals leisure, equals travel, equals golf, equals, you know, sort of endless vacations. But we believe that there are eight actually so called asset classes to designing this next chapter. And we call those eight asset classes a portfolio. And in our words, it's a happiness portfolio for the next chapter. Because really, if someone looks at these eight areas and develops and designs their life around these eight asset classes, then they have that chance to experience the excitement, the joy, the happiness that really is possible in this next chapter.
I want to touch on some of these eight asset classes in the happiness portfolio. And the reason being is you talk about quite a few important things here, especially around identity. Um, in our working worlds, I think most of us don't realize how much meaning and identity and cohesion work provides in our life, that we understand life through the lens of our work. And you mentioned we have relationships. Hopefully they're positive at work. We have a sense of purpose. We're doing work. There's meaning. We want to accomplish it. So it does all these, I think, invisible domains that lead to a happy life. And yet then we retire, and you're right, it's just we assume the leisure, the travel, sitting on the chair in the morning and having a coffee. On the surface, these seem really, really enjoyable, but yet it seems they just don't have the depth that work gave us. So then you introduce these 8 asset class that on the surface, for me listening, it sounds like that's a you're replacing what work gave with these asset classes. I could have got this wrong, but that's where my brain was going. So what
Mhm.
are what are the most important ones? We might not have time to get through all 8, but as we're sitting here talking and our audience are people who aren't even close to retirement and who are close to retirement, what which ones do you think are really important to share right now?
Hmm. Yeah, I think the model, just going back to your audience, not all of them being at this stage of life, I think this happiness portfolio model applies whether you're 20, 30, 50, or 80. So
Hmm.
it shouldn't be something that your younger listeners ignore. They should really be thinking about it for themselves as well as people that are making
And
the life transition.
I want to add to that. I think it's really important. You said something when I asked you a question about transitioning from the traditional financial planner to the more human centric. You said, I didn't totally wrap my identity in the role as a financial planner. So the transition wasn't hard for your identity. And younger listeners, I think there's a really important piece of wisdom there that we need to wrap our self identity in ourselves. So when the external world changes, then we can adapt to it. Our happiness isn't determined by being this role or retiring, etc. And I think it's
Exactly.
important we
Exactly.
practice this when we're young. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very good point. Absolutely. So, just to delve into the happiness portfolio a little bit, and I guess your listeners are working with their financial advisors, it's really important that their financial advisor understands if they want to maintain any kind of professional connection in this next chapter. For example, if they're going to stay on in some capacity, work part time, work on a contract basis, maybe join a board that has a stipend or something. It's important that their financial advisor know about these life changes or these life roles, let's say, so that they can incorporate all of this into the financial plan. Similarly, when someone exits let's say they sell their business, they want to buy a vacation property, they want to help a child that get a better education. All of these have financial implications. So very important for the financial advisor to be involved in understanding what the life of that client looks like. But beyond that, I think the most important aspects of the happiness portfolio have to do with relationships. They have to do with the relationship we have with a spouse or a significant other, an important person in one's life if they're not in a relationship. But who are those people that you would call your loved ones? Who are those people closest to you? Because we all get, I think, the ultimate satisfaction from good relationships with others. So that starts with primary relationship, but it also extends to family and friends. And oftentimes we hear people say that they were so wrapped up in their career that they missed out on their 10-year-old son's school concert or the school play or Halloween parade or whatever. And so this is a time when the focus on family and friends can really come into its own. So, primary relationship, family and friends are two of the most important ones. I would say that also as humans, we derive tremendous satisfaction from giving because in giving we receive, and it doesn't have to be financial support. It can be giving of time, giving of expertise, mentorship, teaching, coaching, and it can also be giving back financially if someone has the means to do that. So I would say that giving back is an important part of the happiness portfolio and something that really provides that sort of contentment and peace at this stage of life. Of course, when we're working in a career or profession or a business, the mind is very, very active because we have goals we have to reach, we have projects working on, and so on. So, to replace that, it's important to consider self development. So, self development could take the form of learning something new, learning a new skill, uh, maybe another language, but something that keeps the brain really engaged and active, because that's one of the pitfalls of people retiring in the classic sense is their world becomes smaller and TV becomes bigger. And, that's not a healthy combination as well. So, um, all of this is underpinned by being physically and mentally healthy. So, physical health and well being, as well as emotional and spiritual health, I think are a very big part of it as well. But then we cannot forget about leisure. And, it doesn't mean that you're so busy doing all these other things or being all these other people that you don't have time for recreation and leisure. I think we all need a balance between the the growth part of it, and just kicking back, enjoying downtime, enjoying being at leisure, the travel, the golf, the other pursuits, the other activities. So, all of these to me are the important aspects of the happiness portfolio. And I believe that if we successfully implement the happiness portfolio, we get to live what have written books about called the rich life. And, if you just think about a financial context, that's a narrow context for rich, but a rich life is one that is filled with all of these meaningful activities and people and so on. And that's the essence for me of a rich life.
Thank you for sharing. I really like this happiness portfolio. Maybe this is like picking your favorite child, and is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it. Susan, for you, when you look at this happiness portfolio, if you had to pick one of them that gave you the best return on happiness in your life, which one would it be?
I would say family and friends.
Mm,
I think there's no substitute for. I'm fortunate that I have children and I have grandchildren and siblings, and I have a group of very close friends. And I would say that if all else was stripped away, I would say that my family and my friends would stand out as being the most important relationships. I couldn't go very far without saying that if I didn't have the health to enjoy it, that
mhm,
would be a close second, or if not equally important, because maintaining physical and mental health is paramount, really, to the enjoyment of the relationships that we have the potential to have in our lives.
mhm. You worked with financial planning or wealth advisor with your financial clients for years, decades. What do you think they got wrong when it comes to what retirement is?
The advisors, you mean?
Sorry, that wasn't clear. The clients. What did the
Oh, the clients
clients
went.
get wrong? Their
Uh-huh.
perception of what retirement would be, what did they get
Mhm.
wrong?
I think they got wrong that life was going to automatically just be wonderful after retirement, and that all the problems they had, all the sleepless nights they had, all the concerns or worries they had would just disappear, and retirement would be this magical, wonderful time of life. And I think that's the what they got wrong was really ignorance. And not to blame them. It's society's fault and maybe the media to some extent painting this picture of retirement as just being all fun and games, and life's a bowl of cherries after you retire. And I think that the problem is that people really didn't think deeply about what it could be, and just bought into a stereotype of what retirement used to be, or the Hollywood version, as I call it.
Hmm. I think you should share Allan's story. I understand this is a story that had a lot of impact for you, and I think a
Mm,
lot of listeners will appreciate this when they think about what retirement should be.
right. Yeah. Thank you for asking me about that. We sort of beaten around the bush and talked about a few aspects of it, but truly, Alan was a client of mine on the financial side. His family had started and run for many generations a furniture in the furniture industry, and Alan had been my client for some time. He turned 65. He had financial freedom. He had the wherewithal that he could retire comfortably and not worry about money. And I was having a meeting with him in about November of that year, and I said, "So, Alan, what's next for you?" And he said, "I can't wait. I've got this beautiful home in Florida. It's in a gated community. I've got a swimming pool in the backyard and a golf cart parked in the driveway. I belong to the golf club. I can't wait to get down there and live out my retirement dream." So he left in November, and I didn't see him until he came back from the South in April of that year. And I was truly expecting to see this exuberant, happy, healthy, tanned man that had just had the best time of his life. That was my expectation. And instead, I was shocked. He was not looking well. He was actually despondent, almost depressed. And I said, "What?" Allan, what happened? And he said, you know, he said, I got so bored with the same guys that I played golf with every day. He said, I actually got tired of swinging that golf club day in, day out. Here I thought it was going to improve my game. It hasn't at all. And I've injured my shoulder because I've played way too much golf and not taken care of my physical body. So he came back from what he thought was going to be his retirement dream, disillusioned, despondent, injured, bored, kind of depressed. And at that moment, I said, oh my goodness, this is a terrible scenario to have those kinds of expectations and dreams to be shattered with those issues that had arisen for him. And that was really the catalyst for me to decide that I needed to do something more than just focus on the financial side. That was the catalyst for me to say, we need to change the conversation here. We need to educate people about what's possible, and we need to educate their financial advisors to start to have these conversations with their clients so they understand them better and they can integrate their life decisions into the financial plan and into the investment and insurance plans that they do for their clients. So that's what really set me on this mission, was having a story to tell you like Allan, but many, many other scenarios that I can elaborate on too. It didn't all look like Allan. Actually, I had some clients that made this transition beautifully. They had no regrets about stepping away from their career, their profession. They were enjoying life to the hilt. And so it's not everybody that experiences what Allan experienced, but it's more common than you think. And also, people don't want to go around telling others about this because most of their friends are saying, you're the lucky one, you're retired. So it's not cool for them to start saying that it's not all that it's cracked up to be. They don't want to admit that maybe there's some pang of loneliness, some pang of boredom, regret, and so on.
I mean, that's the greatest fear. My dream isn't what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then you're right. We don't want to tell people that, and then we continue on living this disillusioned version of reality, like you explained with Allan. I'm curious. You mentioned Allan's story here, but you said that's not everyone. Some people retire and go in this third phase, and it's great, and they're full of joie de vivre, or the enjoyment of life. What do you think differentiates between these two?
Um, I think in the cases of people that are enjoying life after that didn't go through some of the issues that Allan faced, are people that had an idea of what they wanted to do that was meaningful to them and helped others. And here's another example of someone that did actually make this transition very smoothly. Her name was Barbara. She was an executive, I'd say middle to upper management in corporate life. And she always loved dogs. And she was clear before she stepped away from her career. She said, I've always had a passion for working with dogs. I love dogs. She said, but I know that I can't just walk my dog all day. So what she decided to do was get a companion dog. And she trained this dog as a companion dog. And then she took her dog into seniors' homes, hospitals, long-term care, rehab places. And she would just go in and start talking to the patients to cheer them up. And of course, everyone likes to pat a nice dog. So this dog was so helpful to the people that she was visiting. And she got tremendous satisfaction herself from seeing people cheer up and from the help that her companion dog, had given to others. So maybe that's a little, anecdote, a little story of someone that did transition well. But I think in Barbara's case, she knew what was going to be important to her. She knew that she wanted to share and give back to people that were in a less advantaged position to her. And the vehicle in her case was the companion dog. For other people, they find meaning in perhaps board work, volunteer work, working at food banks, volunteering in a library. There are many, many places for people to share what they know, what they have, and ways for them to give back. So I think if people that expect that this next chapter is just endless relaxation are the ones that are subject to the most disillusionment. But the people that proactively make a plan and want to live a plan are the ones that prosper and do the best.
Earlier, you talked about sometimes in retirement, people feel your words were rudderless and drifting. And that makes me think of if I don't have a plan for when retirement comes, if my plan is just to not work and be happy, we might experience Allan's situation. Had all the financial means, all the fixings and trappings, yet if I'm rudderless and drifting, it doesn't matter how many golf rounds I do in Florida. I don't have to. What you're really hitting on here is that meaning and purpose and fulfillment we get from friends and family in retirement. This makes me think about time. It's that fickle thing, time. We think we have so much of it, yet you could probably speak to this. It seems like, boom, before we know it, we've have 40 years in this industry, or before we know it, we're grandparents or retiring. I've heard you talk about how we need to start thinking about how much more time we have in retirement, because it could be 25 years. I want to get your insights on how you think about time when it comes to this third chapter in our lives.
Well, as you say, time's fickle and we never know how much time we have. I mean, that's the scary part is you could walk out and get hit by a bus tomorrow, or you could have a cancer diagnosis that curtails your life dramatically. So, and maybe it's a little bit of motherhood and apple pie to say that we need to live each day to the fullest. We need to take advantage of all of our opportunities now and not sort of just sit back and wait and hope, but actually take the bull by the horns and do something proactively that's going to extend your lifespan, your health span, and your happiness span.
Hi, it's Sean. I know I'm breaking into the conversation just for a moment. There's good reason. If you're here, it means you care about living with more purpose, more meaning, and deeper connection. And that's exactly what the YouPotential podcast is all about. When you hit that subscribe button, conversations like this, the ones that challenge you to think differently and open to new possibilities, keep showing up to you every week. And when you share this episode with someone you care, you're not just passing along a podcast. You're giving them a chance to reflect, to grow, and maybe even to reimagine what a good life can look like for them. So please take a second, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's spread the conversations that truly matter. Now back to the show. I think I've read or I heard you say that you're 72 years old?
I'm actually going to be 75 soon.
75. Okay. 75 years old. You have more experience on this earth than me. What's the most important thing your experience has taught you about time?
My experience has taught me about time is that on one hand, there's no time for everything you want to do. And on the other hand, if you make the best use of time, you can accomplish a lot. You can do a lot of things. So it's sort of it's ironic in a way that people say time is fleeting, and yet using time well, we actually have lots of time, barring any unforeseen misfortune, of course. So having a mindset that says, I'm going to live to 110, 120, and having that view in mind that you have the potential to do that, it means that you're really not running out of time in your 70s, 80s, or even 90s if you take that long-term perspective.
That's such a interesting lens to have. It's so short, but yet, hey, as you say, focus on the right things. It's actually quite long. Thank you for sharing that. You talked earlier about the RichLife, this framework you have. Why do you believe the RichLife framework will lead to, as the name suggests, a rich life?
So really, I would say I developed this mantra for a rich life. So in its narrowest definition, people think rich equals lots of money. In my view, rich means robust, full, deep, It's the all-encompassing word rich. So the
Hmm.
mantra for a rich life is live well, however you define that, give back, which we've talked a lot about, and leave a legacy. And so the leave a legacy part is interesting because as people get older, they tend to think more about purpose. They tend to think more about their reason for being on this earth. So when you read an obituary of someone that you really admire, you think, what was their legacy? Probably they left a legacy professionally or in business or in education, something they did with their career, their profession. But they also left a legacy in terms of the communities they've helped, the family involvement they had, and really the contribution that they made to society. So for me, a rich life is live well, however you define that, give back your time, your temperament, your talents, your knowledge, perhaps money, and leave a legacy. Be conscious of what you want to be remembered for and how you want to be remembered. And that to me is a rich life.
It sounds delightful. Of these, which one do you think most retirees can work on?
Most retirees, um, I don't know that I can distinguish between all of them. I think it's really important that they live well. This is the last crack at living well, however you interpret that. I think an essential part is giving back, whether that's helping your kids with your grandchildren or volunteering or raising money or donating money. The give back is an important piece. And I don't think anyone would want to go to their grave feeling that they didn't leave a positive contribution. So I'd say it's
Mhm.
really, Sean, a balance of the three.
Mm,
I couldn't really say that you can do one without the other. They're all connected.
I like that answer. Balance is key. Balance is key. You've talked to so many people who've retired, who are in retirement, and then 38 years before who are working towards retirement. What do you think is a common regret that retirees have, say 5 to 10 years into their retirement journey?
Some of that, I don't think it's the same for everyone, Sean. I think some people maybe if they've been faced with poor health, they probably regret that they didn't take care of themselves better, that they worked too
Mm,
hard, didn't sleep enough, maybe grabbed fast food instead of eating properly, had too much stress and worry, didn't exercise. I think for those in poor health later on, their biggest regret is not taking care of their bodies, not feeding them bodies properly or giving the body what it needs. So I think that's a regret. I think for some other people, it was not making a plan of just the ignorance of going into retirement thinking, oh, it'll just all take care of of itself, and then winding up kind of lonely, bored, isolated, and realizing that it's a long road back if they wanted to recultivate friendships, relationships,
mm,
activities, and so on. So I'd say that those would be the main two is health and involvement or a plan really to stay engaged.
mhm. You've been talking a lot about relationships. It's come up a few times, and health. For people who are approaching retirement, they conceptually can think about, yeah, I want to nurture my relationships. I want to build relationships. And then, they get the retirement watch or whatever the present they get after retiring is, and they wake up and say 6 months after the honeymoon phase is done, they're like, all right, I'm ready to get these relationships. But maybe other people aren't ready for those relationships. They're working, etc. I have heard people say like, hey, I want to build these relationships, but my kids are busy in their lives. It seems like everybody's busy and I'm sitting here waiting for the relationships. How do you see retirees starting to build these relationships, I guess, on their terms when they're ready?
hmm Well, I think it's not just you lost all your relationships the minute you retired. I think there probably are people that you worked with, that you interacted with during your career that are more than just business connections that did become true friends. And I think cultivating those previous friendships, or maybe going back to people that you went to school with, even that you were in your neighborhood, that there's, they always say there's nothing like old friends. And
Hmm.
there's a song actually about it. Old friends mean much more to me than new friends. So I think there's those people that know your history that you can kind of pick up where you left off. And many of those are probably going through the same thing you are. So rekindling those early relationships, I think, are is part of the story. But then there's also things to do on a shared mission. Let's say you're working for a charity, you're doing volunteer work for a charity. You are with other like-minded people that have the time, that have the dedication, the passion to help that charity thrive, survive, etc. So forming those relationships, I think, is important. And then there are people that you travel with, perhaps, that you met on a trip and that you like to share time with. So having a broad range of these social connections going back to early days, and then people that you have a shared passion with of philanthropy or giving back, and then people that you just simply have fun with. And all of that, of course, along with family members that you maybe haven't seen as much of as you'd like to, or that you'd like to repair some relationships that maybe got fractured along the way. So there's so many areas and ways that people can cultivate these positive
Wow.
relationships. I can't just point to one and say one is the be all and end all. But it does start if you're um, with a spouse or a close person in your life. I think that's where it starts, and then it goes out from there.
I think an underpin to this conversation is this idea of you've been saying planning and being intentional, that when we retire, it just doesn't unfold and happen to us. We have to be intentional on what we're going to do with all this new time. How long do you work with clients on this planning stage and being very intentional on how they craft and create this third stage of their lives?
So we really work with people at 3 stages. We have, and I'm sure you have in your practice, clients that love financial planning. They want to know, exactly where they stand financially. So for those, they may start 3 years out to start to think about it. Pre-planners. Then we work with people that are on the cusp of retirement. So they know that, December 31st is going to be their last day, and they're aware that on January 1st, it's a whole new world. So we work with people on the cusp of retirement. We also work with people that have bought into perhaps the Hollywood version of retirement, or have simply retired and thought that that was going to be fine for the rest of their life. But then after a period of a year, 2 years, 3 years, they say, there's got to be more. I really
Mm,
haven't taken this proactively. I haven't been serious about it. And I need to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. So I would say there's no ideal time. It's really whatever suits the individual, either pre planners on the cusp of retirement or people that have given it a test drive and realized that they maybe do need a plan and they do need to work with someone to develop the plan. I always
mhm.
equate the help with planning to having a personal trainer. 25 years ago, if you said that you'd hired a personal trainer for your fitness, people would look at you with, you know, like you were crazy and just say, well, can't you just go to the gym and do a push up and sit up? Why do you need a personal trainer? Well, now we know that having a personal trainer is the best practice if you really want to take your fitness and health seriously. And we feel that people needing help with their next chapter planning is kind of like personal training was 25 years ago. People said, do you really need to work with somebody? But we do see that it's a best practice, just like athletes, actresses, media stars, everybody that wants to succeed, business executives that really want to succeed to the best of their ability, have coaches, have people that helps guide their journey. And I think this stage of life warrants that kind of assistance and support and help. Someone that's been through it before, that knows where the pitfalls lie and know how to help people actually proactively make a plan so they can achieve that rich life feeling
Mhm.
in these years.
I like this framing around the rich life, and not rich in dollars, like you pointed out. You mentioned this coach. You used the word coach, and I know. you've been involved with strategic coach for a while. You've been in coaching programs. I think framing retirement and even our money conversations around having a thought partner, a coach, however we want to call it, really allows us to wrestle and dance with areas that we don't normally get the chance to. In your experience, what benefits does working with a coach have as we create these new chapters in our lives? And I'm not specifically talking about financial planning or retirement here, but just in general, what benefit have you found having a coach has?
Well, I think it prevents you from falling into a lot of traps. You know,
Mm.
the some assumption traps or ignorance traps, whatever. So, by working with a coach, you circumvent a lot of the issues that you would have had if you didn't work with a coach. I also think a good coach pushes you a little bit, makes you holds you accountable. You know, in the case of a personal trainer, they hold you accountable to doing your program, and they also make sure that you're doing it correctly. So I think having a coach prevents problems, it accelerates the achievement of success, and it's really somebody to hold you accountable and be your guide through this brand new part of life that you've never experienced before, and you're probably not going to get a second kick at the can. To me, that's the benefit of working with someone.
Hold on. You said probably not. Is there a potential that I have two lives?
I don't know about that, but
Oh, well, you said,
it's
okay.
possible.
You said probably. I was thinking that, wait, do you know something that I don't know? Um, I think it's wonderful, especially as we talk about time. This time we will never get back, and having a thought partner
Yeah,
seems
and I
like,
think that thought partner is really part of the equation, but I still come back to the role of a financial advisor in this. And that is that once you're planning and working with this lifestyle planner, let's say this next chapter planner, it's really important to link that back to the financial planner, the financial advisor, wealth advisor, because so many of the decisions and activities that you're involved with can have financial implications. I've touched on a few, like buying a property, maybe helping a child with education, maybe investing in a new business. But all of this, and even from an estate planning perspective, if you've been successful financially and sold a company or received a retiring bonus of a significant amount, really important that your financial advisor know this so that they can help you structure your financial portfolio, your insurance needs, your estate plan in a way that's most suited to you. Without that, to me, financial planning is done in a vacuum, and there should be a linkage with the life between the life plan and the financial plan. And I think that's the perspective that, having been an advisor in my previous career, allowed me to understand.
yeah, you have that lens, that orientation of how important the dollars and cents actually are in adjusting our boat so we're not rudderless, and then perhaps buying a bigger engine so that we can we can move. I'm stretching on my analogy there. I want to talk about relationships again, and this time a little different relationship. We've talked about how important our personal relationships are, yet we all have this unspoken relationship in our lives with money. You have a relationship with money. I have one. All the listeners have had one or have one. When you think about your relationship with money, Susan, how has it changed and evolved since your early 30s to now?
Okay, when I go back to my early 30s, at that point, my relationship with money was I need to make money to support myself, help to bring up my family. And so there was a drive really to try and maximize the opportunities in my earning years. And I think that's the same for most people that unless they are financially independent through inheritance or windfall or something like that. But I think the our relationship with money actually starts way back in childhood. And in my case, being a baby boomer, my parents saw hardship. They lived through the Depression, through World War II, and I watched them work really, really hard with meaning, with purpose in their lives to provide for the family. And I was the oldest of four. So 4 kids to raise in those times. So I think that work ethic that I experienced from my parents really saw me through into my working career. And then I think relationship with money was, okay, if I have enough, how can I share that? So that got me involved with a philanthropy. It's involving me and helping my children, my grandchildren, and being in a fortunate position to be able to do that. But when I think about the role of money, when I wrote 9 Steps to a Rich Life Retirement, the book that I published in 2022, the first step of the 9 steps was ensure you have adequate financial resources. So I would never counsel someone to enter this stage of life until they had clear visibility about their financial situation. And that's the role of the financial advisor, is to really make sure they have that visibility. And the worst thing someone can do is assume that financially everything's going to take care of itself, give up their engine for making money, whether it's their career or their business, and then wind up later in life living a long time, finding that they need money to for healthcare, for other benefits that are going to benefit their life. So, ensuring that you have financial resources before you enter this stage is paramount, and that's where the role of the advisor comes in, is to paint that picture using the facts, using the numbers, and of course, we have to make a couple of assumptions about that. One is how long are we going to live, and the other is what will the cost of living be, and those are two variables that we can only do what if scenarios for. But having that visibility on the security in this next stage is really important, because without funds to do all these things I've talked about, um, life can be pretty scary and very worrisome for people.
Your comment reminds me of a conversation I was having with Dr. Ben Tel Shahir. He studies happiness, and he says that money can help us flourish in life, but money itself cannot create us. Wait, I'm going to redo that one. He says money can help us flourish in life, but money itself cannot make us flourish.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I look at money as an enabler, not an end of itself in itself. And that was really what the thought process was in my first book, which was The Rich Life: Managing Wealth and Purpose. So it's not enough just to have the wealth. The wealth has to be connected to having a purpose for the wealth. And then when there's purpose and the means to achieve what you want, to me, that's happiness, which then leads to that rich life scenario that we've talked about.
That's interesting. In around this book you write here, Wealth and Purpose, there's this idea that delayed gratification, you work hard, make sacrifices so that you could live well later. Do you think delayed debt gratification, building that wealth component of your book, is necessary to then have purpose, or can you integrate both?
Oh, I think you can integrate both. I mean, you can't be so single focused just on money that you forego a lot of life's opportunities or the chances that you get to do other things. So I think it's a balance between having it all now, which I know is, sometimes some of the younger generations are painted or tainted with that brush that, they're all about now, 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 and no concept of delayed gratification. But I think also when we look back to previous generations, they just worked, worked, worked and didn't really get to enjoy the fruits of their
Mm-hmm.
labor. So they delayed gratification way too long. So to me, it's a balance. And again, this comes back to the role of the financial advisor to help sort of figure out, not to say, don't take your family on the African safari because, you won't have enough money, but to actually paint the picture of what's possible and to enjoy life as you go, but also save for that rainy day and ensure that you have the resources if you do live to 110 and you may have some health issues. So it's really a fine line, but it's really a dialogue between the individual or couple or family and their advisor about where that where that fine line exists.
Speaking about this fine line, I'm wondering, again, from your life, I like to ask people insights and wisdom so that I can hopefully guide my boat in a good direction. But we want to live this good life, yet we gotta save, we gotta build up some money. I'm curious, in hindsight, looking back at your life, were there decisions that perhaps scared you? You mentioned African safari, maybe taking a family on an African safari when you felt maybe you couldn't, where you then later look at back at life, be like, I'm damn glad I went on that safari. Did you have any of those moments in your life?
You know, it's funny. The other day, I was sitting in my living room, and I have a two-tier coffee table, and underneath on the second level was a photo, a picture book that my daughter made for me as a gift in 2014. And it was a photo book of our trip to India together.
Mm.
And I just thought, wow, that was over 10 years ago. We had the opportunity. The world seemed like a safer place at that time to travel. And so India was where we wanted to go. And we shared so many wonderful times together on that trip. And here we are over 10 years later. She's now ensconced in her career. She has a young baby who's going to be turning 1. And so life moved on. And I just look back and say, wow, I feel so fortunate that we had that opportunity to spend that special time together, to see a part of the world that I'm not sure I would venture into now, and to make that a lifelong memory for both of us.
Yeah, these are key moments where perhaps you would pay triple just to have that same experience today.
Right. Yes.
Susan, thank you so much for sharing your insights in and around retirement. As we come full circle in this conversation, for people listening, when they're starting to think about this third stage in their lives, or they're in this third stage in their lives, what do you think is a first step that people could start implementing this way of thinking that you talk about?
Mm. Okay, this way of thinking. I think it's, there's a lot of books written about this subject, about happiness, about enjoying life. And I think the first step is really self knowledge. What is going to be meaningful to you in this third stage, in this next chapter? You know, for some that really love to work and stay involved in their profession and their career, maybe they're going to postpone their this date by a few years or a number of years, or maybe they're going to stay in working part-time or very involved right until they're the end of the day, until they expire. But for other people, it's really an opportunity to take stock. What's really important? What are the dreams and wishes they've always had? And what's possible now beyond just buying into that sort of traditional notion of retirement? You're put out of use. You might as well sit in your rocking chair. No, no, no. We're not buying into
No.
that.
Well, I love it. You are changing the conversation on the next chapter in life. And that question, what's possible now that you just said, I think is fantastic. My last question for you, Susan. Let's imagine that you are now at end of life. Doesn't matter how old you are, but you find yourself sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that gives you complete peace, ease, and contentment. And you decide to write a letter to your children's children on what you learned was a key to live a meaningful life. What would be a message that would be in that letter?
To my children's children,
Mhm.
I would really tell them that life is to be lived and they should take advantage of every opportunity that comes their way, whether it be education, travel, involvement with others, and so on. And that really at the end of the day, it's about the relationships that they have with their siblings, with their parents, with their grandparents, even with their friends. And I would really encourage them to put that above all else, that meaningful relationships rise above financial gain, and that
Hmm.
taking advantage of each and every day is really the ultimate.
Thank you. I love that. Meaningful relationships rise above. Wonderful. Susan, thank you so much for sharing some insights into your story and your work. For listeners, where do they find your books, your company, etc.?
So the books, 9 Steps to a Rich Life Retirement is on Amazon. And I did record the audiobook myself if someone wanted to hear it in that form. But there's also a little hardcover book. And I should point out, I have so many books on my bedside table that I never get to. But when I wrote 9 Steps to a Rich Life Retirement, I wanted it to be easy to read on a plane ride in an evening or two to get the gist of it. So it's not a daunting book at all. As far as looking us up, the website is www.nextchapterlifestyleadvisors.com. So nextchapterlifestyleadvisors.com. And on the website, we have an area for both individuals and couples that are looking to plan their next chapter. And we also have an area for professionals, financial advisors, people that work with clients to help them engage meaningfully in this conversation. I'm also on LinkedIn for anyone that wants to connect with me there.
Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll include those in the show notes. And again, thank you for the conversation today.
My pleasure, Sean. It was great to speak with you. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the YouPotential podcast. I really enjoyed that episode. This conversation, it really reminded me of two things I want to share. First is let's stop rushing through life. Let's enjoy it. Let's build things that matter. Spend time where it actually counts. As we talked about, life can be short when we're spending it rushing and spending it on the wrong things. Or it could feel long if we're spending it on things that actually matter and savoring those things. The second thing is retirement isn't about retiring from a good life. It's about going into the next chapter of a good life. It's a chance to start this third phase of our lives, one that can be meaningful, energizing, and deeply fulfilling. My question this week is, in the next chapter of your life, whatever chapter that is, what do you want to stop rushing on and start slowing down on, making time for? Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.